Hey guys, it's Ryan with Fluid Health bringing you another episode of Science Powered Fitness, and today we're going to go over mobility. Ultimately, there's three real big categories of the reason why your body doesn't move well. It could be a flexibility imbalance, so the actual mechanical properties of the muscle. Sometimes the muscle is actually short, so there's no actual stretch to it. So the sarcomeres that actually make up the fiber of the muscle are reduced, so you actually can't stretch through it. That's one thing. Another thing could be fascia. So it's the connective tissue that basically controls the action of the muscle and how it tethers it to the tendon and eventually to the bone structure. So sometimes we get scarring or overused fascia that becomes real rigid and stiff, and it reduces stretch. So you can't actually stretch through the tissue. And so that would be, again, another mechanical restriction. And we also have neural tone. So it's another idea that the muscle is actually engaged from the nervous system, from the brain, trying to keep the muscle from going into length. And we could show you an example of that here, where, again, we got Mr. Bonaparte. The ab wall is not strong enough. It's represented by that yellow band. The ab contents, right, that viscera starts to bellow out. You see that a lot with these distended bellies. The back goes into a hyperextension. The hips tip up, and then that hamstring gets stretched. So essentially the hamstring's on tension to try to keep the hip from tipping down because it's not getting the support from the abdominals. So that makes that hamstring hyper. Now the brain doesn't want to relax that muscle. So even though it's stretched and longer than it should be in a resting state, it still doesn't go through a full range of motion because it's trying to keep the hip from tipping down, so it's trying to maintain your balance. So that's again a reflex relationship, and the brain doesn't want to let go of the tension. So it's a neural restriction or a reactive restriction. And finally, we have some structural stuff. So I wanted to show this here. This represents some of the mechanics of the joint glides at a joint level, and it's referred to as arthrokinematics. So arthro means joint, kinematics means motion. And when you're in a movement pattern on the joint structure, it can spin right on a central axis, which you can see here, right? It can roll, so you can kind of see how that central axis would move. So as the head of this bone starts to roll on the surface of the concave surface, that would be considered a roll. Or it can slide forward on the surface, and that's considered a glide. Now when we're in load bearing, meaning that we put pressure on the joint, it compresses it, it rolls and glides opposite. So that means the humeral head or the femoral head, let's say, would roll in the sleeve forward and glide back. And that's what gives us its ability to track back into the joint structure. And when you unload it and you decouple it, it rolls and glides in the same direction. So essentially what we're seeing is, again, a either tracked joint or a distracted joint. So if I'm stuck in a joint contracture, what it normally means is that you're over-tracked or under-tracked or over-distracted or over-distracted. So it means that you're either stuck in an unloaded or a loaded position, and then that joint doesn't move well because it's maintaining that position. That could be, again, it's called an osseous block or a bone block, where now I'm trying to move the head back in that socket and it won't move back. And those joint contractures are what we see in postural distortions, where one segment stays fixated in a position that's associated with a specific phase of a gait cycle. And so it's said that you're overstanced or overloaded in that joint contracture series because the muscles are being recruited to support that orientation because your body doesn't know how to get away from it. So there's a lot of reasons why the body could be immobile, but we do want to have an understanding of the physiology and the movement quality through the biomechanics in order to distinguish if the mobility techniques that we're using are actually appropriate for what you're trying to solve, what problem you're trying to solve. So oftentimes in populations, we'll see people using mechanical releases on a structural issue or a neural strategy on a mechanical imbalance. And so we can see that there's a lack of awareness or knowledge of what's really happening. And then ultimately, you're going to see reduced outcomes or improvement in outcome and function. So once again, guys, it's just another opportunity to expand our awareness on some things that could be troubling you or could be limiting your performance or your success long term. So we'd like to bring our awareness up collectively. And if you have questions on any of this, please reach out to us at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. And again, your body is designed to move, so stay in motion, and we'll see you next time.